the challenge is really immense. And now I think we have a video from the Greek Minister of Tourism now, Theoharis.
Good afternoon. Let me start by apologizing for the inconvenience of having to send this video message. Unfortunately, unforeseen parliamentary duties keep me from the live discussion, even though it seems that we're living in the age of the video links. Tourism, a very important sector for our country, and a big question mark hanging over the big question on how to restart it. Tourism is considered one of the hardest hit sectors by the COVID-19 outbreak. The sector is experiencing a rapid and sharp drop in demand and a surge in job losses at a global level, putting many SMEs at risk. Despite tourism's proven resilience in responses to other crises, we have seen this in the past, that tourism picks up very quickly, the depth and breadth of the current pandemic will likely have a longer lasting effect on international tourism compared to other industries, more likely to recover once major restrictions will be lifted. This is due to the potential long-term changes in behaviors that people will likely have, since tourists will become more cautious about traveling overseas in the future. Continuous efforts are ongoing in order to implement effective policy responses to preserve the sector and to trigger international coordination. Government responses exhibit significant differences in ambition, intensity, and the level of government backing existing across industries. This is, of course, important because tourism is an industry that is not as important in many other countries, for example, as it is important in Greece and the other Mediterranean countries that depend a lot on tourism. Greece, let me remind you, has more than 20% of GDP and also thousands and actually hundreds of thousands of jobs depend on the sector's functioning. Now, during the crisis, countries had to answer a number of questions which were very, very important in terms of how to deal with it and how to get out of the crisis. Are we going alone, or are we together trying to deal with this crisis? It seems that mostly, for most part, the answer has been in the second option. Coordination, international efforts were severely lacking. About tourism, do we stick to domestic tourism or do we try to open foreign tourism as well? Now, the question was posed from the start, and the answer has changed as gradually we're progressing from the acute phases of the crisis, where domestic tourism was the only option that any country was considering, to more foreign tourism emphasis that we currently see that many countries are putting on. And finally, how do we strike the right balance between protection and how do we preserve the core of the experience? Because obviously you go on vacation in order to be free, carefree, to think about relaxation and your leisure, your mental state of mind to be healed. Instead, we seem to be stuck with a number of measures that, in order to protect the tourists and the employees, might actually achieve the opposite effect of ruining the experience. Now, each country was faced with a number of challenges in the beginning, in the middle of the crisis, and in the final stages. In the first stage, obviously the health challenge was the most important. How do we preserve the health of our citizens? How do we ensure that the national health system is up to the task? Also, at the same time, we had to find ways of supporting employees and businesses, people and businesses, in order to go into this strange hibernation mode. Corporations must stop bleeding, and employees that do not work anymore because they have to observe lockdowns, they needed financial support to ensure that they could deal with their day-to-day needs. In the second phase, a phase that more or less most of the countries, at least in Europe, are, the internal challenges are about the restart. It's about lifting of the restrictions, but in a way that does not increase the number of cases and the pressure to the health system. Now, this is the phase we're currently in, and it seems at least that our country is dealing with this challenge in a much better way than perhaps other countries. We dealt with the initial phase with great success, and it seems that we're keeping the numbers low as we lift those restrictions. The economic side has to deal with the measures to continue the support, but to also start operating, beginning to wake up the businesses that deal with many sectors, and inside those sectors, obviously, tourism as well. And the final stage, the stage that we're currently beginning to implement, and we will announce today, actually, by the announcements of the Prime Minister, is how do we open the borders, how do we do this in a responsible way, how do we do this while we keep our infection numbers low, and we keep the strength of the health system and also the focus of the health system to change, not to deal with the citizens, but also to deal with tourists as well. As a result, many countries will have to strengthen their health personnel and resources in those areas where perhaps there are not many winter inhabitants, but there are many tourists that will join in the summer. You see that this is a very complicated exercise. It's an exercise that has to deal with many health issues, like the protocols that we are instituting for all the enterprises, the financial side of things, the publicity side, of course. As soon as we lift the restrictions, every country has to come up with a marketing strategy. And of course, it's also a question of ensuring that the value chains, both domestic value chains and value chains that reside abroad, because tourism is an international business, a tour operator in the UK or in Germany, and or an airline in Poland or in France, obviously matter a lot to the Greek touristic industry. So this is a very complicated exercise, and but it's an exercise that Greece is very well advanced in implementing, and also we can capitalize on the goodwill, the good name that we have created for ourselves by dealing with this crisis in a very much professional manner. Now let me close this intervention with a few words on the strategic challenges that lie ahead. Of course, about 6 months ago, everybody was talking about over-tourism, about sustainable tourism, about green tourism. Now we're just talking about the growth of tourism, trying to pick up where we left, just to reach the same levels that we've seen in the past few years. Now this is going to be a tension that we will see in the resolution of which we will see in the months ahead, or perhaps even in the years ahead. And the final strategic challenge is the change in behavior. Perhaps we will see a lot of pressure on big hotel complexes, on the tour operator model, on mass tourism, and tourists will need something more secluded, more authentic, more, if you like, true to the nature of the experience of the area. These are trends that existed before, but it seems that this crisis has exacerbated and accelerated these trends to a great degree. Even if this is the case, we will be faced with a conundrum that in the short term the direction of movement might actually be the opposite. Even if the tour operators are challenged in the long term, in short term, they are the first to be able to pick up and start the touristic flows very quickly after the bans are lifted. So I would like again to thank the organizers for the invitation. I would like to apologize for not being there with you. And I hope that these few thoughts about how to restart the touristic industry, and especially how to do it in Greece, will help serve as food for thought for the interesting discussion that I'm sure lies ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister Christopouli. Now it's my pleasure to ask Savas Perdios, the Deputy Minister of Tourism from Cyprus, to speak. Savas, over to you.
Hi, John. Thank you very much for the introduction.